Hi everyone, I don't usually do this, but today I plan to do a review on the upcoming Up and Over data pack that has been just spoiled by Snowjax. Kudos to him for releasing the spoilers. It's given me a lot to think about, especially on the Corp side. Now, as you dedicated viewers of my channel know, my goal with creating these YouTube videos is to expose all of you to some very cool deck building ideas. So hopefully you all can be inspired to go out there and build your own janky but very fun to play decks. With that in mind, today's review will focus more on how I can incorporate these new cards into my existing decks, or how they can be incorporated into certain existing deck types to give them a new twist, or to create completely new archetypes altogether. Hopefully with this, you will be inspired to come up with some cool new deck ideas of your own as well. I would love to hear from you. Before I finish rambling, I'd like to point out that half of these Corp cards cost either 0 or 1 influence to put in your deck. So keep an open mind as you watch this video, because all these cards can easily be splashed into various factions and might even be more effective. Who knows? Because I'm feeling particularly rebellious today, let's start off from the bottom. We have Hate's Fragment and Dominance Crackdown, both of which are neutral cards that cause 0 influence. Now, the first thing you notice about both of them is that they are essentially anti-noise. Hate's Fragment is obviously a noise counter, as you can insert one agenda back into your deck from Archives of Return and protect it from the runner running Archives. Dominance Crackdown, on the other hand, will punish a noise runner that is completely focused on installing viruses and not running at all. Dominance also additionally works pretty well against the Ian Sterling kind of slow build up deck. However, in my opinion, these two cards are situational at best, and when you're building your deck, you'll find that they will be the first cards that you cut off, as they are simply not worth the deck slot. While Hate's Fragment might not be consuming a deck slot technically, as it's an agenda, you must remember that it's a 5-3 agenda, and ultimately you can only have one of it in your deck, which means that you cannot reliably score it even against noise. So even when you're fighting against noise, you might not necessarily get to trigger it. And still, there are other better 5-3s out there that are just generically better for your deck, like Priority Requisition and Eden Fragment. So the only reason to play Hate's Fragment is if you need a 5-3 agenda and all the other 5-3 agendas available are not that useful. This will most likely not be the case, so I don't think these two cards will see too much play. Right, moving on, we have Reuse, which is a Wayland double operation. It's basically an economy card that works a bit like Celebrity Gift, except that you trash cards instead of revealing it to the runner. And for each card you trash, you gain 2 credits. Well, put it this way, you include cards in your deck for a reason. If you find yourself trashing them, you are doing something wrong. And worst still, it's not even a transaction. So Wayland building a better world does not want this card at all. It could be a great burst economy card to recover from Ram or Count Siphon, since it costs 0 to play after all. And especially when you have a Jackson Howard on the table, you can easily sack 5 cards, gain 10 credits, suddenly you're very rich, and you can reshuffle your agendas back to your pile. That's a pretty good use of it, but if you think about it, at the end of the day, wouldn't it be better to just hit your Jackson, draw more combo pieces, draw more economy events, instead of using this janky combo that you might not necessarily pull off in the end? So yeah, by the virtue of there being much better options in faction, I don't think this card will see much play. Splash in Cerebral Imaging? Maybe. Could be a good alternative to Celebrity Gift. That's something for you to experiment with. Right. Changeling, the second of the 3 Morph Eyes that will come out this Lunar Cycle. It is a 5 install cost, 5 rest cost and 4 strength sentry. It starts off as a barrier, but it can morph into a sentry. Okay, so I'll give you this. It's more useful than When They Go, which was the first one that was released. Unfortunately, I would much rather have a lower rest cost and a lower strength, because like Bastion, it is a binary ice that becomes sort of taxing later on. which means that it is way too expensive to be used early on, and come late game, runners can easily break through it already. So I'm not a big fan of this. Ultimately, I think the whole point of Morph Ice is that, just like the Grail Ice, you are forcing the runner to come up with their entire breaker suite before they can reliably make runs. And if it costs you so many credits to set up your Morph Ice because the rest cost is so high, it's slowing you down as well, giving the runner time to set up the rig to demolish your Morph Ice later on. So yeah, not a big fan of it. Next one, we have Blue Sun, the ID that has been spoiled for ages and people have been flying foul over it. It is a very strong ID, no doubt about that. The best thing about this ID is that you can, Oversight AI suddenly becomes a very powerful economy card, as does Asset-Based Economy, like the Root and Adonis campaign. You can install them and then pull them back to your hand, rinse and repeat to gain basically virtually infinite credits. It's pretty sick, and you see a lot of shenanigans and hijinks with Blue Sun. This will be a very powerful ID, especially considering that there are only basically two other viable options in Faction, and both of them are more geared towards the early game. This one is geared towards the early game with Oversight AI and can sustain its own into the late game, so it's very, very powerful. Definitely something to watch out for. Alright, so that's done. Next, Universal Connectivity Fee. We are now into the NBN stuff. This one's an ice, it's a trap ice. Basically, at worst, this is a 1 credit tax per run. At best, this is a close accounts that works on the runner's terms when they run. In other words, this is not very good, because you want to trigger a close accounts on your own terms to create a scoring window for yourself. For that reason, because it relies on the runner running as and when they please, it's not that effective, as you can't really harness it very well. But of course, I know what you're thinking. Why don't you build a data raven into Universal Connectivity Fee server? Woof, that would be pretty sick, huh? Well, the problem is that would require a bit of setup, during which the runner can freely break through that server, because Universal Connectivity Fee doesn't end the run, and you don't want to res it early on. And more importantly, it only cripples non-AI runners that don't run resource-based economy or magnum opus. Think about it. If they have some sort of way to recover from a close accounts, you are not going to get the most out of this trap ice. So at the end of the day, it's too narrow to be useful in my opinion, but still definitely worth experimenting. Don't count this out.